Hello, it's Matt with customcargrills.com. A lot of people have been asking how we install our letters as well as emblems on our mesh grills. For the lettering, the first step is to find the horizontal center of the grill we're working on. Then, using a letter that has the full height through the center of it, we'll need to find the vertical center of the area we want to place the letters. Using a ruler, I'm moving the T up or down until the center of it is equidistant to the outer grill bezel. Once we've found the proper vertical alignment, we can tape that off and use it for reference. Next, I'm going to properly spell out what our customer has ordered for their truck. The blue tape line we laid out in the previous step will help us properly vertically align the letters. In order to get the whole set of letters to horizontally center, I'm using a long ruler that starts with 0 in the center of it. Counting outwards from the center, we can easily determine where the start of the first letter and the end of the last letter need to be positioned. Once we have the first and last letters properly spaced, I'm going to place some tape around the letters to hold it in position. At this point, I'll no longer need the long self-centering ruler. The next step is to center the rest of the letters within the first and last letters that are temporarily in place. I'm making sure to keep each letter equal distance from each other the best I can. Now I'm going to tape off the edge of the letters to use as a guide for the final installation. This is also a good time for me to double check all the measurements and ensure that the letters are vertically and horizontally centered. Once the letters are good to go, I'm going to open up a new tube of automotive goop and affix the letters to the mesh. Using a toothpick, I'm evenly spreading a thin layer of goop to the center area of the back of the letter. I'm trying to stay about 1/8 of an inch away from the edges the best I can. Once we have a thin layer of goop applied, the letter just simply needs to be gently pressed into place. Providing some gentle force from the back of the mesh often helps get these in position. Some customers may not want to use this adhesive for their own self-installations. A fair alternative to this adhesive installation is the use of 3M double-sided tape. Also, the use of body panel epoxy can be used if access to the right type is available. Once the letters are done with their initial application of adhesive, the tape that was used as a guide can be removed. Within the first few minutes after applying the letters, minor centering adjustments can be made. After the goop is cured, it's time to flip the grill over. On the back of the grill mesh, I'm going to liberally apply more goop to the mesh and the lettering. If I missed any areas on the first application, this is the time to get them taken care of. This second coat of goop is key to ensuring that the adhesive won't easily come off the mesh. In this case, the back of the letters were lightly scuffed to give a better grip for the adhesive to the letters themselves. Getting the best adhesion possible on the letters to the mesh is very key to this project. After about 24 hours, the goop is cured and is very hard. The adhesive shrinks up quite a bit, which is why we used a lot initially. Double checking to make sure the letters are secured on well, it looks like this installation is finished. Now let's move on to an OEM emblem and check out how we install those. From the factory, this specific emblem comes with 3 screw holes for attachment. While it is possible to cut the mesh to accommodate the screw holes, I'm choosing to grind the bulk of them off using a 6-inch disc sander. It's important not to get too close with the sander to the finished edge, because we don't want to scratch any part that will be seen. To finish the sanding, I'm using a Dremel with a drum sander attachment. This tool lets me get the plastic on the back to a consistent depth for a good flush mount. As with the large letter installation, I'm going to use the letter T to be my guide for vertical alignment. Just simply moving the part back and forth until it's centered is the best bet to get this in just the right spot. Using some tape is a great tool to mark where the emblem should go, but it will need some modification before we affix the emblem on. Like the large letter installation, I'm using a zero-centered ruler to help gauge where the proper horizontal alignment should be. Then it's just a matter of a couple small tape strips to mark where the start and stop of the emblem should be. For this specific emblem, some letters are a pinch larger than others. In this case, it's the O's. A small notch in the tape needs to be made to accommodate this oversized area. With the notches in place, the emblem should rest in and be a tight fit to the surrounding taped off area. Next, I'm going to use some automotive goop to start the final installation. I'm simply adding a fair amount of goop to a toothpick and spreading the adhesive around the back of the emblem. In general, I'm trying to stay about a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. The flat areas are the highest on the back and don't need a lot of adhesive, but the deeper inset areas may require a little extra. This process does need to happen fairly quickly, as we don't want the adhesive to prematurely set up. Once the goop is evenly spread out on the back of the emblem, it's time to stick it on. Applying a little bit of pressure from the back of the grille helps the emblem get flush against the mesh. Because the mesh on the bezel curves a little bit, the emblem will need to be weighted down while the goop cures. I'm using 3 separate items that weigh about 12 ounces apiece to gently keep the emblem in the correct position. With the emblem in place, the guide tape can be removed and any small adjustments to the centering can be made. The big thing to look for is making sure the top and bottom of the letters that are known to be of the same height are at the same position on the mesh. After the adhesive is cured, it's time to remove the weights. I'm also going to check to make sure that the emblem is flush on the mesh and held on very tightly. Next, it's time to flip the grille over and start on a second layer of goop. I feel as if we got enough adhesive on the emblem as possible, but I want to add some to the back of the mesh to make sure that it's on there as good as we can get it. If we see any areas that were missed in the first application, this will be a good time to touch them up. As I've mentioned before, this adhesive shrinks quite a bit after it's fully cured. I'm going pretty heavy on the application because I want to make sure it gets in all the areas needed and around the back of the mesh. After about 24 hours, the goop is cured and we're left with a very solid emblem installation. It's always best practice to make sure that the adhered parts are on there as good as possible. In the end, this new mesh grille on the colored bezel looks spectacular with a great blend of aftermarket and OEM parts. Now it's time to move on to an installation that doesn't require any glues. This TRD emblem has a couple stud mounts on the back of it which we're not going to grind off. Instead, we're going to mark where the stud mounts are and cut the mesh in those areas. I've seen some installations done with a drill press, but in this case I'm using a coping saw. I made the cuts that were measured and marked off, but the back of the emblem is still a tight fit. Using some files to shave down the mesh a little more will get me a precise and proper fit. It looks like the emblem is now flush and we're almost ready to fasten it to the mesh. Before doing so, I'm using an oil-based paint pen to touch up the areas that were cut out. If you buy these emblems elsewhere, they do come with some basic hardware. There's 2 very long studs as well as 2 nuts and a pair of very wide washers. The washers are useful, but the studs and nuts I feel should be replaced. With our emblem, we're including shorter aluminum studs as well as stainless locking nuts and a couple plastic sleeves. One of the sleeves will need to be painted black in order to conceal it for the final installation. Next, we're going to thread the studs into their mounts on the back of the emblem. Then just line the emblem up with the cuts that were made earlier, and it should slide into place with ease. Because the emblem protrudes through the back of the mesh, the plastic sleeve is needed to provide back pressure for a firm installation. Properly sized washers can also be used here in place of the sleeves. Using a ratchet and socket to tighten the locking nuts into place works well, but I'm not fully tightening them up yet. Before we complete this installation, I'm making sure that the emblem is level with the mesh and the bezel. Then it's time to tighten everything down. With everything in place and firmly attached, this installation is complete. I hope you liked the 3 different installations I did, and as usual, if you have any questions about this video or any of our products, please feel free to contact us.